and welcome to Time and Again. During his 30-year reign as king of late-night television, Johnny Carson was watched faithfully by an audience of millions. One viewer paying particularly close attention, David Letterman. For an entire generation of stand-up comics, including Letterman, getting tapped by Carson to appear on The Tonight Show was the ultimate prize. Few were chosen, fewer still succeeded. A young David Letterman succeeded so well he was asked back again and again, eventually becoming guest host, and from there getting a show of his own. First a morning show, then late night, where he followed Carson and redefined television comedy. These days, of course, David plies his trade at another network, but his early years were with NBC. And that's our focus on this episode of Time and Again. We'll revisit Dave as an up-and-coming comic in the 70s and an emerging star in the 80s. But let's start in the 90s. June 25th, 1993 to be exact, David's last day with NBC. That morning, today's Katie Couric paid him a visit.
Dave, this is bigger than big. I'm sitting at your desk.
It's exciting, isn't it?
I mean, I can't believe you actually are allowing me to do this. You're not territorial about your desk?
No, I wouldn't let everyone do this, but I have such high regard for you and the work that you do that, sure, if you want to sit in that desk, that's just fine.
Shucks, Dave.
Yeah.
Can you show me some of the toys?
Well, that's a telephone. That's interesting. There are several buttons there, and I don't quite understand the hold button feature, but maybe we can get one of the technicians in here to explain that to us. But that enables you to handle more than one call at a time,
I
Katie.
see. All these
we'll get the brochure. We'll get the pamphlet for you.
No,
but it's
come
very
on. You do have some fun things, and I really, can you show me?
Yeah, what do you want to see? Let's start with...
I want the bubble machine.
Okay, the bubble machine.
That?
Yeah, you click that on back here. What we need is music for the bubbles, because bubbles, as lovely as bubbles are in and of themselves, they need a little music.
It doesn't work.
But I don't think Paul is here.
No, he's not here. We should bring
on.
Paul in here. Okay.
Okay, now, and just within a matter of minutes, the studio will fill up with bubbles and choke out all of the oxygen, and you and I will be breathing heavy like that.
I like this.
Man,
now, how long have you had this machine, Dave?
We've had these, geez, I think 3 or 4 years.
Yeah. Now, was this your idea?
I don't know that it was my idea, but it's a darn good idea.
It's a good idea.
You guys should have a bubble machine on your program in the morning.
Do you think that would help the ratings?
I have another idea for you in the show. When you sign on in the morning, and then you kind of re-sign on every half hour, right?
Yeah.
You say, "Hi, I'm Katie Couric." Bryant Gumbel says, "Hi, and I'm Bryant Gumbel." And then together, simultaneously, in unison, the two of you say, "And we're cooking eggs." And that puts people in the mind of breakfast, and there's a strong olfactory association, because what smells better than eggs cooking in the morning?
Bacon cooking in the morning.
I'm Katie, I'm Bryant, and we're cooking eggs. Or you could vary it. It could be, we're frying bacon. I got a million of those kind of ideas.
That was 1993, and by then, Letterman's ideas about comedy had made him one of the hottest properties in television, the focus of a multi-network, multi-million-dollar bidding war. It had all started for Dave 18 years earlier, in 1975, when he left his native Indianapolis to head for Los Angeles. Within 4 years, he'd made quite a name for himself. Here's NBC's Jack Perkins in 1979.
Good morning from Burbank, California, from the set of The Tonight Show, the place where many a young comic gets his or her first break. The second big break sometimes will come if, once he's appeared on The Tonight Show, he is invited back to guest host the program. Then he or she has really arrived. Well, few have arrived lately with more talent or notice than David Letterman.
He first performed as a guest on The Tonight Show in January. He's come back to guest host the program 17 times.
Somebody asked former President Ford if the nearly 3 years that he spent in the White House were his most difficult 3 years, and he said, no, actually, he spent his most difficult 3 years in the 4th grade. So,
How does a comedian develop an act? Well, usually it starts by bringing his comic talent to whatever he may be doing. Consider the movie critic in Indianapolis in the early 70s.
And you also get to see a short, fat, bald-headed geek hack his brains loose every morning. Now, this is not one of the funniest movies I have ever seen, but it was funny enough to keep me from sneaking out of the theater to go out into the lobby to snatch purses, which I do frequently if I'm bored.
Or the TV weatherman.
It's going to be just like it was yesterday, and just like it is today, and just that's going to be like that tomorrow and again on Tuesday, because nothing's going on. If you look at him...
Sir David Letterman.
Letterman gave up local news in 1975 and came to Los Angeles, where he began developing an act at the Comedy Store nightclub.
And on the back of the can of Gillette Foamy in red letters it says, "Do not spray shaving cream toward open flame." Thank God they finally had the sense to put that warning on there, huh? How many times have we all been seriously injured after you go to the trouble to build a roaring fire in the bathroom sink? You get out the charcoal starter and blammo. Well,
David, tell me how you go about writing new material, developing it.
Okay, you get an idea. Something, I'll give you an example. Waiting in line at a supermarket, and you look over and you see the newspapers, the couple, the tabloids, whatever they are, and you see a headline. And this occurred to me a couple of years ago. I was buying several pounds of Spam and some shaving cream for the party, and I looked over and I saw the headlines in this one particular magazine that says, "How to Lose Weight Without Diet or Exercise." I instantly said to myself, that pretty much leaves disease. Now, I went to the Comedy Store that night, and just as I had seen it, I said it on stage, and it got a laugh. And I've been doing that ever since.
He still puts in several days a month at the Comedy Store, not for nostalgia, but rather because of the enormous burden he's under to continually develop new material.
Alpo, on the side of the can, it says with a certain degree of pride from the folks at Alpo, it says, "All beef, not a speck of cereal, not a speck of cereal." Now, see, my dog spends his day rooting through garbage and drinking out of the toilet, you know. Chances are he's not going to mind a speck of cereal, you know.
I spent about 3 years perfecting about 30 minutes of material. And that perfecting, I mean, I was guaranteed of a laugh generally every time I did it. And within a couple of months, all that material was gone. So I'm at a point now, I did the Tonight Show last night. I was writing jokes while I was having makeup put on that I would do a half an hour later on the Tonight Show. So you don't have that luxury when you get into the Tonight Show. But when you're working on material to do in clubs, you better have it down to where it's going to work over and over.
Letterman's work with The Tonight Show and as a TV writer earned him a star at NBC, albeit not the Porsche or Mercedes that usually go with it.
No pictures, please. I don't know anything. Where are the money?
You've got a good show tonight, I think.
Tonight Show producer Fred DeCordova has made him a regular guest host, but all this exposure has put him in a new position, using, at times, other writers' material.
I have to use writers because I'm doing so much television that it eats it up pretty good. I'm very pleased when I can buy a joke and have it work better than anything that I've ever written. To me, that's a great luxury.
When Letterman isn't on the road or on TV, he's at home in Malibu.
Now, you see this light-colored carpet here in the living room. Now, I'm going to have two fat guys come in here with a lot of carry-out chili, and they're gonna decorate the living room for me. And oh, look at that. There's my dog Bob. Bob never moves from that. I staple gunned his feet to the deck out there, and he's always there, and I think it's kind of a lovely sight. Now, in here...
A career as a local reporter, a stand-up comic, a Tonight Show regular, and what, you may wonder, has all this taught David Letterman?
Be as well-groomed as possible. Have a nice, neatly pressed suit and well-mannered. Don't spit on the stage.
Letterman got his start in broadcasting, doing local TV and radio in Indianapolis, but for some reason he wanted to be a comedian. In 1975, he found his way to Los Angeles and got on the stand-up circuit. A few years later, still unknown nationally, Dave was a guest on Tom Snyder's Tomorrow Show with fellow comedians Billy Crystal and Meryl Marco, Letterman's girlfriend and future collaborator. Dave told Tom how his early experience in local TV came in handy.
And local news was a source of a lot of my jokes and pieces and so forth. I do jokes pretty much, one-line jokes tied together. Flimsy premises.
Could you give me just a little bit of local news?
Local news always was, to me, by and large, local news was a waste of time, I thought, where I was, because it was a vehicle to entertain and hype ratings more than to provide people with journalistic quality news reporting. This differs, of course, from market to market. Check your local listing for a time. But this actually happened, and this is the thing that I do in my act. This was the eyewitness news format, and at the time the concept of that was to make the news
just as funny as you possibly could, laughing, joking. Well, one day in the city where I worked, being Indianapolis, there had been 3 murders, unusual for a city that size. And the news director, whom I believe we mentioned already.
Bill Dean, strange man.
He determined that it would not be real amusing to have the anchor man report all 3 murders back to back. Okay, this was the premise. So I took it one step further and decided it would be amusing if they gave one of the murders to be reported to the sportscaster and give it to the guy while he was reading the ball scores. And in essence, the joke goes, the guy's reading ball scores. First in the National League, the Mets over the Braves, 3-2. Reds got past the Cards, 5-4, and the Dodgers murdered the Giants. Speaking of murders, looks like 45-year-old Eddie Poster won't be going out to the old ballpark anymore.
Working at the Comedy Store, what's the best thing that could happen? Who would walk in that would just open a door or get you a shot or an appearance?
My ultimate desire is to anchor the nightly news on NBC.
I can help you there. I got connections.
Failing that, I guess living with Linda Ronstadt. And those, so far, are the only 2 goals I've set for
Well, you
myself.
have to be governor of California first.
Well, I've got to call into Sacramento.
Wrong place, Malibu.
I don't know, I'm very content with what I'm doing. I like Meryl, I'm not making a lot of long-range plans. It's just kind of, literally, when you get at this level of show business, I guess we can call this show business, yes. You don't know from week to week what's going to happen.
What was going to happen was this. That 1978 appearance with Tom Snyder got David Letterman noticed. And before long, he was booked as Johnny Carson's guest on The Tonight Show. He was asked back repeatedly and was soon tapped as Johnny's guest host. Not bad for a gap-toothed kid from Indianapolis.
5 years ago, before Dave Letterman went out to the coast, as they say, to seek his fame and fortune, and I guess he found it, because now he does occasionally substitute for Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. Dave, did you ever think you'd come riding triumphantly home on a goat?
This is a real pleasant bit of my childhood, being on this merry-go-round. It used to be at this local park on the north side of town near where I live. And we'd pay the guy about $80. We'd tip him $80 to speed it up to around 90, 95, and kids and chili dogs and stuff flying everywhere. A lot of fun.
You take off on a goat going 80 miles an hour. That's something. Well, you go Johnny Carson personally. You know, that's a measure of fame and fortune. People who have Johnny Carson's home phone number. Is it true you have it?
I have it only via a fluke. Now, to me, this man represents, I would say he is pretty much typical of American television. He represents American television to me. And I've watched him, liked him, admired him. I've been in awe of him all his career. So I had a chance to speak with him on the telephone. And I got a message.
Did you win that in a contest?
No, yes, it does sound a little like a contest. Call the number you see on the screen, folks, and you too can get it. And I got a message that his wife called me. I was doing a show that she was involved with, and she was very charming, very nice, put me a great deal at ease. And she left a number, and I thought, well, this couldn't be the home phone number. It's got to be the office, or even if it is the home phone number, he's not going to answer. It'll be Sabu or Johnny Yoon will pick up the phone or something. So I called the number, and it was Johnny. And I spent the next 10 minutes just quaking and trembling because I'd never spoken to him on the phone. It was like talking to the Pope or something for me. And by the way, I have the Pope's phone number also. And then at the end of the discussion, we were both going to be in an event, and I asked him if he needed a ride.
What did he say?
Well, he said, no, I'll just meet you down there.
You would have picked him up in...
I was going to drive to Bel Air in my pickup truck and give Mr. Carson a ride.
David Letterman and me back home in Indianapolis in 1979. David Letterman's success in the late 70s filling in for Johnny Carson got NBC executives thinking. Before long, Dave moved to New York and was hosting a show of his own every weekday morning.
How do you like doing your own show that early?
So far it's been fun. It's a lot of fun because actually you can work fairly efficiently that early in the morning, much to my surprise. I
really?
Normally don't get up much before 2. And then it's usually with the help of pills and whiskey, but it's great. It's a good way to start the day.
Your humor is fabulous because it's so visual, and also you're very, very bright. I mean, did you start, how old were you when you first began?
Well, I was just a couple of minutes old when I first began.
Cute, Letterman. And how old were you before you started getting paid for just beginning?
I came up as a broadcaster. I never, you know, people talk about the class clown and so forth, and I was not the class clown. I wrote for the class clown. I would get the guy with the marginal IQ, and I'd say, here, set fire to your shorts in study hall. and then
he would do it and be expelled and do hard time for it. And
but you'd stay in school.
Yeah, I'd be laughing. And I never, it wasn't until much later that I realized that you might find a position in which you could get paid for making smart remarks.
And just having people burn their shorts.
Yeah, yeah.
That was Dave with Mariette Hartley on Today in June 1980, a few days after his morning show premiere. 3 months later, Letterman was back with Tom Snyder on The Tomorrow Show, where he talked about his life and how it had changed since he moved to New York.
Here it's a little different. We used to go down and watch the whales, the California gray or blue. It's hard to tell from that distance.
Colorblind, yeah.
Yeah. They would migrate near my home, and then you move to New York, and of course you have it's the psychotics migrating. So that's that was a major adjustment, and the noise was a problem. When I first moved to New York City, I was living at 55th and 6th Avenue. Now, for those of you watching Medford, Oregon, for example, it's the busiest, loudest, nastiest intersection in the world. It's where the Army does their tank testing, and General Motors works on the new diesel equipment there. So that was unpleasant. Every day would start with a fist fight and end with a fist fight. So that was tough. And it took me about 3 months to get used to just living here. And putting on the show has been better and worse than I thought it was going to be. When everything goes great, it's about the best feeling.
Isn't it fantastic, though, when it really clicks? And
you've had it, too.
Yes, I have. Okay. Not tonight, but...
But then when it comes apart, there's nothing you can do. It just goes lower than you ever thought it was going to go.
Don't you find, though, that even if you do a dud on Tuesday, you know you're going to come back in there on Wednesday, and you can kind of forget about what went on
Tuesday. That's the beauty of doing a daily show, and I like doing a live show. I just don't have the patience to rehearse the barroom sketch all week and then do it and tape it, and that's it. I like to go in, rehearse it once, and do it as hard as you can, and then go on to something else and forget about it. And the beauty of knowing you're coming back the next day is great.
Dave wouldn't have the luxury of knowing he was coming back the next day for long. 1 week after that appearance, his morning show was canceled, victim of poor ratings.
Run into on the streets here. For instance, you might run into Gregory Peck. You might possibly run into Richard Harris. I don't believe it.
Hi, Willard. How are you?
I don't believe it. It's David Letterhead. He's the idol of the... You're starting your new production when?
February 1, but before we get into that, I just wanted to congratulate everybody affiliated with your show, The Today Show, for being on the air for 30 years, and I know that means a lot to everybody coming from a guy whose own show lasted 18 weeks, so it's a commendable anniversary.
I don't know of anybody in that room and anybody in the show business that hasn't had the same experience one way or the other, but we wish you the best. I happen to be your biggest fan at 260 pounds.
Thank you very much, Willard, and thanks for the opportunity of letting me get up at dawn. I appreciate that.
I do a great... Watch this. And now, here's David.
And we have your resume.
Thank you.
David Letterman with Willard Scott on January 14th, 1982, the 30th anniversary of The Today Show. Welcome back to Time and Again as we revisit Dave's early years, the late 70s to the early 90s, his years with NBC. After his success filling in for Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show, Letterman was given a show of his own. In the morning, it didn't last long, but it was a critical success, and it paved the way for Late Night with David Letterman. A few days before that got underway, Dave was my guest on Today.
Dave is back in New York. You're going to host a late-night television program that premieres Monday night. How are you? You just sick about it or excited?
No, I'm a little of both. I'm a little nervous, and but I can hardly wait to get it on and on its way, because the first show, the trouble with doing a new series of shows is the first show. Because as much as you try not to emphasize it as anything significant, nonetheless, it's still the first show, and you feel like you've got to do something special, and that creates a little anxiety. But I'll be glad to get this thing off the ground, as we say.
You're from
Indianapolis.
Let's be honest. You're from Indianapolis.
That's right. I'm
as
willing
I
to
am
own
too.
up to it. Sure.
Did you know that when we lived there, we were what they now call flyovers?
I didn't realize that there was a term for people who actually traveled over the state of Indiana.
It is not just Indiana. It is everybody who does not live in New York or Los Angeles.
Oh,
and it's a rather arrogant term that people who are also what bicoastal used to describe the people in the middle who I guess they mean don't matter.
I like Indiana. It's great. I wish I was there now. It's
You mean at this very moment?
No, not at this very moment, but it's a little smaller than New York City. It's not as big as New York City, and it's a little, I don't know, it's a very pleasant place in which to grow up, and I often miss it.
If you had to set out to do a shame of the city report from the hometown, where would you begin?
I think it would be bad hair pieces. There were a lot of them. You see a guy walking down the street like he's got an end table on his head, and I think that would be a place to begin. I could name names at this point, but I won't.
You're on.
Oh, I'm on. I'm
Go
sorry.
on. Proceed.
Enjoying listening to you snort.
You deep. You incapacitate the interviewer. You can self-interview yourself.
Well, I don't know.
A few days after that, Dave had a crack at making the entire country laugh, or at least that part of it that was awake at 12:30 at night. Late Night with David Letterman debuted on February 1st, 1982.
I'm very excited about this new show, and it's a big 3 or 4 days for NBC.
The Letterman Show redefined a late-night format that had been virtually unchanged since the mid-50s. Letterman and his audience were children of television, and the show reflected that, poking fun at itself and at all the phoniness and pomposity of show business. Letterman wasn't just a joke teller. His whole attitude was funny. After his show had been on for a couple of years, Dave was again my guest on Today. What is your sign?
Oh, Jane.
You're from California.
April 12th.
Meaning?
So what would that be, Jane?
Pardon?
Aries.
That would be an Aries. That's right.
Aries.
I'm
Is
an
that
Aries.
good?
Oh, no, it's the worst possible sign you can have. You know, it's just psychopaths, misfits, deadbeats, mass murderers. Oh, we're
You feel
terrible.
right at home there.
Yeah, it's a horrible thing. I'm lucky to be this far in life.
In 1989, David Letterman had been with NBC for 10 years and hosting his groundbreaking late night show for 7. That January, he sat down for a chat with Bob Costas.
Who haven't you had on the show? Not necessarily comics. Who you'd like to have?
We've had pretty much everybody that you ever would hope to have on. You know, there are a few that you're never going to get, but it's not like we're really pining away to have a particular guest because we think, oh, this will be wonderful. It's usually a guest that you have no expectation from that comes on and proves to be a real delight.
Who came out there and you said, we wanted to get this guy or this woman, this is going to be great, and they just stunk?
In addition to yourself?
Yeah.
Geez, I don't know.
And the easy lines are always the best. Those fat fastballs you can't resist.
I don't know. It can happen on any given night. Any person you think might be great can disappoint you. Anybody you think might be average can be exciting. I don't have a list to answer that question. I'm sorry.
When you got the morning show on NBC that wound up being canceled, you were doing a lot of the same sort of thing that eventually was very successful in late night, and for reasons that probably had to do more with the time slot than your performance, the show failed. Did that make you think that maybe you couldn't do it? Did you come into the late night thing with a lot of anxiety?
I'm sorry, I wasn't listening.
Good. Nor were most of the people out there.
No, it was the morning show.
Let me make it more direct, and that way your mind won't wander. No. Coming off screwing up on the morning, did you think you sucked and you'd just go down the drain in late night?
Yeah, well, I mean, any time in show business, television and so forth, you don't know. Your one shot may be it. So after the morning show was canceled, I really didn't know, and it was a great period of anxiety for me. And fortunately, I was very, very lucky. I have been as lucky as anybody can get in show business and television because I got another chance.
You talk to Carson at all beyond when you're on his program?
I've talked to him a few times. I have talked to him a few times, and it's one of the strangest, most nerve-wracking experiences of my life because you pick up the phone and it's Johnny Carson, and you think, no, it's not really Johnny Carson. It's somebody doing Johnny Carson. And I've actually been to his house a few times. And
what's the furniture like?
It's beautiful. It's a lot like this. It's you know, it's like suddenly, you know, you pull out a $5 bill, and who's on the $5 bill? Lincoln, is that who it is?
Yeah.
It's been so long since I've seen a 5. And so you see him. He's there on the 5. You see him day in and day out and day in and day out, and you grow up with him, and he's always there. Well, for me, Carson was like that. In addition to being really important to my career and also to the careers of anybody in comedy, and then suddenly you see him face to face, and it's like, oh my God, it's the guy on the $5 bill. It's the guy you see on the Tonight Show every night. It's Johnny Carson, and I've never been able to feel comfortable with the man. He's been very gracious to me, very nice. We even played tennis one day at his home. Well, you got to see this place. It's more like an Olympic venue than a home, really. But I don't think that I could spend every minute of my life from now on with Johnny Carson. I don't think I would ever get over that sense of awe. I mean, if you look at what the guy's accomplished just in sheer time that he's put in, and not just put in, he's dominated for a quarter of a century. And we've been on the air 7 years. And if that stands by itself, it looks pretty impressive. You put it next to Carson's record, it's spit on the windshield.
Or something like that.
Yeah.
You know, there are a lot of young comedians that feel pretty much the same way now about you that your generation growing up felt about Carson. They're going to look to you for some kind of stamp of approval. There are people that might work on your show, might not on Carson, so the ultimate stamp of approval is to come on your show and hope that you like them.
Yeah, let me just say a word here about young comedians. We don't need any more. There should be some kind of a cutoff. There should be like a moratorium for 10 years. Don't go into comedy. I don't want to be bothered by these guys. I don't want to see them around. I don't want to worry about somebody breathing down my neck. I want like 10 years of free breezing, easy sailing.
So it's a generous attitude, a man who remembers his roots and doesn't turn his back on them.
That's right. That's right. I think Sophocles said it best when he said, screw them.
How's it look under there?
Oh, you know, I think I was right. The transmission is shot.
Yeah?
Can you hand me a wrench? An adjustable one?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no!
My spine! Oh, everything's going wrong!
Must lift car. Dave counting on me.
That's it. Oh, that's it. Oh, thank you, Paul. Oh, boy. Oh, Paul, I don't know how I'm ever going to be able to thank you for that.
Well, I may never have good posture again, but I think saving your life was a little more important.
Yeah. I got to get some tea.
Where'd you find Schaefer? Well, that's not the question. He was already a well-known guy. What made you select Schaefer?
Well, he was our only choice, really. We found out early on when we were putting the nighttime show together that he was available and that he was interested, and we said, that's it, you got it. I mean, I knew enough of his background. I knew more about him, I guess, as somebody who really was good at comedy, somebody who was very funny, and knew less about him musically. But the combination of the two, we felt like this is the guy, no more calls. And he continues to be, from my perspective, night in and night out, the best part of the show. I mean, he's very important to me. The band is very important to me. And even if everything goes horribly wrong on the show, at least I know the audience has heard really nice, exciting live music in the studio. Unfortunately, on the show at home, they don't get to hear as much of them as
yeah, they play hard-driving stuff just before you come on that picks the audience up.
If he were to decide to leave the show, I'm not sure that, I don't know what I would do. I would maybe think of not doing it anymore, because I just can't imagine, getting used to another guy in there. It could be done, I guess, but I would find it very discouraging.
Dave needn't have worried. Paul Schaefer remains his band leader and sidekick to this day. Hosted The Tonight Show for a remarkable 30 years. For more than a third of that run, he was followed on NBC by Late Night with David Letterman. In February 1992, after 10 years on the air, Dave talked with today's Katie Couric.
What do you look for when you put together a show every night?
We like the show to be, Meet the Press is really what we're after.
Very funny.
If we can do like a 12:30 version of Meet the Press, then we say to ourselves, yes, another job well done.
We're gonna finish our chicken here. The
Truffles are expensive, ain't they?
It's very expensive. It costs like $600 a pound.
Wow.
And everybody asks me what they smell like. I always tell them it smells like sex to me. You just try to smell them?
Geez, what have you been doing?
Actually, in Austria, they pronounce it Schwarzenegger.
Schwarzenegger.
So just to confuse you a little bit.
Yeah. Does the name mean something?
Means black plowman.
Black plowman?
Plowman, yeah.
Wow. Tell me about the wedding and your relationship with the Kennedy family.
What do you want to know?
Well, now,
Well, how do they feel about having a black plowman in the group?
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy a beverage now, if you don't mind.
No problem. In our lovely Today at 40 mug. Did you know it's the Today Show's 40th anniversary?
No, really? Like I've been in a trunk in a rental car at LaGuardia. No, I had no idea. Oh, and I see it's in color now, too. Wow.
That's right. Isn't this lovely?
No, but see, there you go. Talking about relative terms of success. 10 years seems meager, seems like no accomplishment whatsoever. It seems like a trifle when you compare it to a show that's been on the air long enough to have their own coffee mugs.
That's right. Pretty impressive,
yeah,
huh?
There's a breakthrough.
I understand that you make fun of this revered historic institution known as the Today Show.
Yeah, I've made fun of the show. This is one of my favorite things about being on the air this long, to have this kind of an association. We share crew members, our show and the Today Show, and one of the shared crew members had overheard a conversation where Bryant was supposed to have said, "I'm going to go up there and just hit him."
Not our Bryant.
Yeah. And it was because they had this primetime version of the Today Show, and the producer in those days, who I don't remember his name, Steve Friedman. That's right. He came to us and he said, "We're going to do this primetime show," and he said, "Between you and I, it's sort of going to be dull and plodding. So we need some heat. We need something to pep it up. We need to stir up. We need a little controversy. Can you do something?" And we said, "Sure. We'll try and interrupt the show. We'll scream at Bryant with a bullhorn."
See what we can do. Go ahead, Carl. Take a look out there.
Attention, people of New York City. My name is Lawrence Grossman, the president of NBC News. This primetime program was my idea, and I'm not wearing pants.
Nobody told Bryant. You know, Mr. Friedman, Mr. Big Shot, Mr. Vince McMahon of the World Wrestling Federation didn't mention that to Bryant. So it all comes as a surprise to him. And he was very angry, and I don't blame him. And for years and years and years, he wouldn't speak to me, and he was really, really quite upset.
Bryant Gumbel may have been peeved with Dave for interrupting the Today Show, but who was actually on the air when Letterman did his thing with the bullhorn? I was, conducting a live two-way interview with the stars of Miami Vice. Maybe you can't tell from looking at me, but I was completely rattled, and I was the last one to know what was going on. 1992 was Dave's 10th anniversary, but it was also the year Johnny Carson would retire. Letterman wanted his job, but so did Jay Leno. Leno got it. Today's Katie Couric asked Dave if he was angry about how things had worked out.
I was never angry, really, about that. I was, disappointed, obviously, but I was never angry. And it's interesting to me that somehow the story was that I was angry and that I was mad at the Tonight Show and mad at Carson and mad at Jay and on and on and on. But that aspect of it was so tiny in what was a bigger story. And it was just a matter of having worked for a network for a long time and things usually being great. And then suddenly within the last year and a half or so, there was some problems, there was some trouble. And the Tonight Show just occupied, it was kind of another item on a list. Well, we had trouble with this. What's the deal there? We had trouble with that. What's the deal there? We had trouble with this. Oh, and then, by the way, now here's the Tonight Show. You guys just kind of dropped by and casually mentioned this to us. So in and of itself, it was nothing that angered me.
Have you since made amends with the network executives here?
Well, I'm not sure I'm in the position to be making the amends.
Well, have they made amends?
Well, I will say that things are better now than they have been.
Yeah. You're going to stick around?
Well, I think I have another year left on my contract. And at that point, it will have been 11 years that we've been here. So we'll just see what things look like then.
What about just a couple quick personal questions?
What do you mean, have I made amends?
Okay, excuse me for living. Have the two parties made amends, okay? You're reading a lot into that question, Dave.
I'm sorry.
Succession on The Tonight Show was a sore subject, and it would remain so for months. Ultimately, NBC kept its commitment to Jay Leno, and Letterman moved on. But not before joining Tom Brokaw for a little fly fishing in Central Park. We'll be back with that in a moment. David Letterman started with NBC in the late 70s, guest hosting for Johnny Carson on The Tonight Show. 14 years later, after narrowly missing out on the chance to replace Carson full-time, Letterman moved on. His last NBC show was on June 25th, 1993. That night's nightly news featured Dave doing a little bonding with Tom Brokaw, fly fishing in Central Park.
I don't think anybody's going to mistake this for Walden Pond somehow.
I feel like a little like Andy of Mayberry or something.
Well, this is where a couple of country boys belong.
I like to come here either sunup or, you know, just at dusk and watch the headless torsos float to the surface.
Do you sometimes get up at sunup and think, how did all this happen? I'm Dave Letterman, weekend weatherman from Indiana.
Well, I realized early on when I first was able to get a job in radio that there had been a huge mix-up somewhere.
Everybody knows Dave Letterman on television, but you've not let them see the other part of Dave Letterman.
Well, there's not that much to the other part of my life. There really isn't. I spend my weekends pretty much flat on my back in the kitchen. So it's just like you get to be on television 5 hours a week, you know, that ought to be enough.
Has comedy changed in the last 10 years, in your judgment?
With all of the comedy clubs, with all of the outlets for comedy on television, and with all of the men and women doing comedy, I think that the number of people who actually amuse me and genuinely make me laugh is probably the same as it was 10 years ago. And I have to be careful when I start talking like this because I can kind of hear my dad talking.
Oh, that ain't funny. What the hell? Anybody can do that. That's not the way he dropped his pants. Who cares? I can drop my pants. They don't give me $1 million.
What about Mom?
When I first went into show business, my mother, you know, told friends that I was in prison because it was less embarrassing to her than being on television. And she is the least demonstrative person that I know. Very quiet, very thoughtful, doesn't have much to say ever. The first time my mother actually saw me do stand-up comedy, I was on a show with Doc Severinsen at Clues Hall on the campus of Butler University in Indianapolis. I was just the opening act, and so I came out and I did my 20 minutes, and then Doc Severinsen came out. And that was the very first time, and it was the most frightened that I had been in my adult life. And after the show, she came into the dressing room. I don't know how she sneaked through security. And she stood in the corner with one of my sisters and didn't say anything, and I'm changing clothes, and now I'm really sweating because I'm not hearing anything from Mom, and I'm thinking, oh, I've embarrassed this woman, I've mortified her, I've somehow just ruined her friends. And finally, after about 8 minutes or so, she said, David, we'll be going now. And I was just crushed. I thought, what do you mean we'll be going now? After all this, after I quit my job and pack up the truck and move to California, now I'm back and I'm getting paid to make people laugh. So she can be very, very quiet, but there's no sweeter woman in the world.
You're making a lot of money.
Oh, like you're not.
Didn't say I wasn't. You're making more. Is it sometimes a problem to know what to do with it?
No, I've never been motivated by it. So when I left Indianapolis in '75, I had saved up $5,500 from the job I was working at. I was making $300 a week, and I thought that was great. That was about 16 grand a year. I was working 5 days a week, and I thought, this is slick. And I packed up the truck with about $5,500, $6,000 in the bank, and that seemed fine. Now, to me, it seems like suicide.
Any big surprises in the new show?
When we get over to CBS, we're going to start doing really good shows, really much better.
Good luck.
Thank you very much, and thank you for this and everything.
David Letterman didn't get his dream job succeeding Johnny Carson. Instead, he ended up competing with The Tonight Show. Most observers agree the competition has brought out the best in both shows. From a viewer's standpoint, that may be the best possible outcome.